Good morning. Hebrew is not a mystical language, but it is special and unique. What makes it that way? Before we get started, hit the like button and subscribe, and grab yourself a cup of coffee and let's dig in. 3 reasons why Hebrew is a special language. Number 1, Hebrew is considered a holy language. 2, Hebrew is a Semitic language, gives it some unique characteristics. And 3, Hebrew is the biggest resurrected language in the world. So why Hebrew? Why pause and explore the language of the Old Testament? Especially since in this channel, we look at ways to use entertainment, especially science fiction and fantasy, as a springboard for conversation about the gospel. What does an ancient language like Hebrew have to do with science fiction? Well, since both the Old Testament and New Testament form the foundation of our faith, we should probably be familiar with it, especially if we're going to start talking to some people about some deeper subjects. So in preparation for this live stream, we've done a poll, put out a poll, and that said, in what language or languages was the Old Testament written in? The results you see below, we had Hebrew only, got about a quarter of the results. Hebrew in Aramaic got about, almost 2/3 or 3/4 of the vote. And then we had a little sliver saying Hebrew and Chaldean. Nobody said it was made up in the Middle Ages. Now, I guess you could say that being made up in the Middle Ages is not mutually exclusive with saying it was written in any of these languages. But the idea might be, okay, somebody threw together some Latin and created a religion and threw it there. We can tell definitely there's countless historic records that prove that the Old Testament is ancient. And we could look at some of the dating for that. And that probably would not be bad as a subject of live stream later on. So we're looking at these like so let's take a deeper look at what languages were actually in the Old Testament. What languages were used? And yes, you guys got it. It is Hebrew and Aramaic. Now, Aramaic is only used for 269 verses of the about 23,000 verses in the Old Testament. And it's only found in Ezra and Daniel. They're written in an imperial Aramaic, which was the lingua franca of the Neo-Assyrian and Neo-Babylonian empires at that time. So it was the language that was in use. So I got a good comment on this poll. This was from his YouTube name, his or her, I have no idea, male, female, is Gull. I hope your parents didn't name you that. If they did, then bless your heart. But the question is, what is the difference between Aramaic and Chaldean? That's a good question. The term Chaldean generally refers to a group of people in southern Mesopotamia back at the time during those empires. It refers to a group of people rather than a distinct language, but their language would have been a form or a dialect of Aramaic. So in a broad sense, you could say that, yeah, it was Hebrew in Chaldean, except the Aramaic that was used in Daniel and Ezra was the imperial Aramaic. And so there is some differences between the two, but it's pretty close. So pat yourself on the back if you said Hebrew and Chaldean is close enough. Okay, I think the few respondents who put that in there. So what makes Hebrew special? Hebrew is a holy language. Now, in a previous video, I talked about Hebrew is not a spiritual or mystical language. And sometimes these terms can be, people have different ideas for these different terms, like what is spiritual? Well, we definitely know that Hebrew is not a mystical language. You don't say things with Hebrew just the right way, or write Hebrew letters down, or just Hebrew, the letters themselves being somehow have magical powers in them. That was done in a previous video. I got some flack for that. I'm surprised the number of people that would actually believe that. But we're going to look at why Hebrew is special. And the first thing is it's a holy language. And what do we mean by holy? What makes something holy? It's something that is set apart for a purpose, usually for a religious or ritualistic or spiritual reason, that you're putting something aside. Let's say if I had this cup and it was used only for some kind of ritual, and I would put it aside, clean it, do that. I wouldn't use this cup to, I don't know, feed my dog with. I wouldn't put it down to say that this cup would then be set aside for a purpose. In that regard, I would use the term holy. And so if you can think of like the furniture and the implements that were used in the temple of Jerusalem, that those things, the menorah, the Ark of the Covenant, the table for showbread, all those kind of implements and things were set aside for a specific purpose. So those would be considered holy. In the same way, we can look and see what makes Hebrew holy. And one of the ways is it's like Greek is, in a little bit of a smattering of Aramaic, was used in the original manuscripts of the Bible. God chose those languages to convey his word, but he chose them because they were a common language. They were not something only that scribes and the elites knew. They were something that people on the street would have used. And the reason for that is, this is different from other religions where you have this high and mighty language that only those in the know can understand. You have to go through me to be able to get to God. Instead, God's saying, I'm going to go directly to the people and I'm going to talk to them. In Greek, we have Koine Greek. It's the modern Greek, not modern, excuse me. It would have been at that time. The Greek used on the streets. It's common. It wasn't classical, so there's some differences between classical or the Greek that Homer would have used, and it's definitely not modern Greek. We can go over Greek at another time in a different live stream if you guys want. But the point was that all these languages that God used, he's speaking directly to you, and he wants to get that message out to you. And that's part of what we're talking about with this. All these live streams is getting the message out, getting it to the common person, getting it. What's important is not so much the language itself, but the message behind it. And so the second thing that we're looking at with Hebrew is that it is a resurrected language. And I'm going to put this up here. Hebrew was taken from, it was a dead language. It wasn't used anymore except in ritual and in scripture, just written down. It was used during worship. It was set aside. And even some Orthodox Jewish sects, they only use Hebrew for ritual and set it aside. It is for them holy. It's not used on a regular vulgar method. Vulgar meaning in common practice, not that it's something you can't say on TV. But Hebrew was one of a handful of languages that was brought back to life after not being used for a long time. And I think over 1,000 years, the Hebrew was not being used. So I'm going to throw something up here on the screen, and this shows modern resurrected languages by the numbers. You have Hebrew, Welsh, Basque. I thought Basque was in common use, but it came up on my research as actually being resurrected. Irish, Gaelic, Scottish Gaelic, Maasai, Cornish, and Ainu. I'm not sure how to pronounce that one. It's indigenous people of Japan. It's being resurrected. And although I have 500 here, there's not a specific number. It's very few is what was recorded. I didn't really have a hard number. But I want to put this on a graph. And you can see that the graph here, this Hebrew by far has the largest number of speakers in modern society that use this ancient resurrected language. The next one is maybe less than 10% of what Hebrew is. You have 9,000, almost 10 million native speakers, or fluent speakers, I should say, use the language, and then Welsh comes down as number 2 with 900,000. This number here that you see is also includes about not just the speakers in Israel, the state of Israel today, but you also have about 220,000 fluent speakers in the United States. So Hebrew, the first thing is Hebrew is the biggest resurrected language. We've got Hebrew as a holy language. Hebrew is the biggest or most widely spoken resurrected language. And then finally, Hebrew is a Semitic language. We're going to take a little more time to focus in on this part. What does that mean? Who cares? There's different language groups, different language families, but there is a difference for Hebrew. So if you look at this pretty cool graph, it's like, what happened? Something got splatted on my windshield. But this shows breakdown of different language families that are in use today. And you have these groups that are done. It's like you see on the left-hand side, European group, you have on the top of that a subset, North Sea, then Slavic, and divided between the East and the West. And at the top there on the East side, you have Afro-Asiatic. Both Arabic and Hebrew are a part of that. And another way to look at it is how it's broken down over time. And these are guesses. We really don't know. Just like we group these languages together, we're looking for similarities. These are not hard and fast rules, since language is something that changes over time. It morphs, it borrows words from others. The grammar then changes. You have vowel shifts, all sorts of things happen. But here you see a pattern flowing, highlighted in yellow, that started who knows when. Your guess is as good as mine. And it broke down and split again until it became this Afro-Asiatic language group. And you have many in there, but this focuses on ancient Egypt, which is now ancient Egyptian, which is now extinct, and Semitic languages. And Hebrew's mentioned there. This chart does not show the hundreds and hundreds of languages that would be in here. It only looks at a few representational ones. You have ancient Egyptian. You see how close that is to Semitic languages. And we're going to take a look at how the morphemes, the text itself, the alphabet that's used for these languages, and how they changed over time. Hebrew being related to Egyptian, how they're similar in many ways. So what are the other, it mentioned Semitic languages, or what are the other Semitic languages that are or currently out there or have been out there over time? Well, you have Akkadian, which is dead, no longer being used. Somebody might try to resurrect that as language. You have to have an idea of how it's spoken. Sometimes all you have is a written form, and you may not even have complete text and have an idea of how all the grammar is used. But that's Akkadian. And then you have Aramaic, which is endangered. It still is being spoken in some parts, and that is the language that Jesus spoke. Primary language. Arabic, number 3. Hebrew, Phoenician, Ugaritic, Ge'ez, Amharic, not to be confused with Aramaic, Tigrinya, Tigray, Afar, and Maltese. Of all these Semitic languages, only Hebrew is a resurrected language. So we had that list of resurrected languages earlier, and now we have Hebrew, and those two cross, and Hebrew is both Semitic and resurrected, so it's unique in that way. Here is a map showing the distribution of Semitic languages, native Semitic languages. We have had a huge spread of Arabic across northern Africa because of the advance of Islam. And so with that came Arabic got spread a lot further. But these are more the native speakers, and you can see where all it kind of sprung out, this whole area. And Hebrew is only a part of it up in the north that came that would have been considered a part of the language group. And then you have the morphemes, how the letters went over time. You have early Hebrew, and this, we're going to take a look at another chart here real quickly, where early Hebrew got some of its influence from ancient Egyptian, or a common source with ancient Egyptian. It changed from early Hebrew, looked like an ox, to middle Hebrew, a simplified form. Late Hebrew, this is the letter Aleph. This is the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And then you see what they call the block or square form of Hebrew, where it's almost like a cuneiform form, not a cuneiform form, calligraphy type of written. And you have the break off of Greek and Roman letters, Latin letters, coming off from this, and the influence of where the numeral system that we have, the Arabic numeral system, could have been derived from that as well. Ancient Phoenician is in here somewhere too. So let's look. This is going to be an eye chart. If you're looking at this on your phone, good luck. But if you have this on your laptop or computer, you might be able to see it with the larger screen. This comes from the Ancient Hebrew Research Center, and if you like, put in the comments. Wow, we got a lot of comments here. We'll have to go through those later, and I will get to comments at the end. By the way, once we go through all this, if you guys want to see this chart, I have a link for this chart. I can put it in the description later after this live stream is done. But this chart shows the progression again a little bit better from early, middle to late development. Gives the name, like Aleph it did have an earlier name there. A picture that it was associated with, almost like a hieroglyphic, that these are pictographs of what these letters represented, and the sound that came from the pictographs. Then you have modern Hebrew and how it's related to Greek. So modern Hebrew, you have Aleph, Bet, Gimel, and you can see where Greek, alpha, beta, gamma, and the G sound, the Gimel, and these two letters, first two letters, alphabet, alpha, beta, Aleph, Bet. That's where these are derived from. So, what are the characteristics of the Hebrew language? Although modern Hebrew uses the same number system as we do, in ancient Hebrew, they use letters for their alphabet. They did not have a numbering system. Modern Hebrew does. They use the same Arabic numerals as we use, and write it in, I think it's the same direction. I'm not sure. I had to look that up again to see if it's actually written the same direction. But they used their own letters as numbers, and Greek later did the same thing. They didn't have a different. And then you see the Roman numerals again using it, but they used a different method, a different form for that. So each letter in Hebrew represents a number, and that gave rise to numerology and some other things with that. I don't read too much into that. Second thing that is a unique characteristic, or specific, I shouldn't say unique characteristic, specific characteristic with Hebrew, is written right to left. But there we go. The numbers are written left to right. I thought I had that down somewhere. And they're the same as the numbers that we use in English today. That's the modern numbers. The Hebrew alphabet is consonants only. So here's something, we talked about this in a previous video. You have an abbreviation. You don't have the vowels in there. It's a shortcut, like the word management, MGT in English. You see just those letters that are put together for that. We would look at that and we would know, oh, management. And the same with native Hebrew speakers, that they would look at that and they could look at their own words and know, even without the vowels, what they mean. Now, there are some that would be used in different you have to look at the context for them, because they're the same form, written form. And then later there are points that are put in there. And we talked about that on the previous video too. Pure Hebrew words are always based on a 3-letter word root. So one of the that's a unique characteristic with Hebrew that does come down to the biblical translation. It's almost like a puzzle that you put these together and then you build up a little bit on these roots. It's really key. You have these consonants, this 3, maybe 4 consonants that are the root of these words. Then finally, Hebrew is very close to Arabic. They're both Semitic languages. We're going to take a look in a minute here about the similarity and the dissimilarity between both Hebrew and Arabic. Both modern languages, of course, with what's going on politically right now with these two groups in fighting, you do have a very close languages that are almost like Spanish and Italian. It's probably an oversimplification, but those two languages, they're buddy, but they're not the same. And we'll talk in a minute about why that could be an issue. And let me bring that up. So Hebrew and Arabic, you might have somebody who is an Arabic speaker and say, well, I understand Hebrew. They're so much the same. You have words like salam alaikum would be a greeting in Arabic, and the Hebrew greeting would be shalom alaikum. And then shalom al shalom would be the response back, both meaning giving peace to you. So there's a lot of similarities there. So let's look at the other similarities and dissimilarities between Hebrew and Arabic. They're both Semitic languages, the language family. The script direction is the same way, right to left. The vowels. In Hebrew, you have vowel points that can be added. You don't see those often in modern script, but you do have vowel points that are there. In Arabic, you have vowel points, but they get more complicated. Root system, they're both root-based. Abjad script, which means it's consonant. They're all consonant-based, and then you have the vowels that are added later as some kind of points or extra script on top or around the words. Alphabet, of course, the alphabet's different. The age of the language, how it changes over time. Hebrew has been revised. Arabic, because it's so widespread, has different dialects of Arabic and really, really heavy accents depending on where you go. Holy text, of course, you have the Tanakh or the Old Testament and the Quran between the two. And grammar, there are a lot of shared, but there are distinct characteristics between both languages. So if you have an Arabic speaker tell you that he understands Hebrew because he speaks Arabic, okay, it's like somebody who speaks Spanish says that they understand Italian because they're sister languages. There probably are some shared words between the two. There's grammar that's shared between the two, but they're not going to understand a lot of the nuances that are in there. So of all these things that are said for the Hebrew language, it would probably be good to say, what's with all this? What difference does this make for me if I'm going to be diving into understanding scripture enough to be able to talk to people? You don't need to understand Hebrew to understand the Bible. It's translated well enough as it is. There might be some nuances where you need to dig in, and there are plenty of resources to be able to find that. But there are two unique characteristics with Hebrew that you should probably be aware of. Number one, root system. That three-letter root system gives it an edge of how words are shared and how they're changed within the language, that there is some rhyme and rhythm to it in that. And the second is, and this is probably bigger, there's not really a tense system, a verb tense system in Hebrew like there is in English and other languages that you might be familiar with. Our verb tenses are pretty intense. They're pretty complicated. Instead, they use something called aspect, and they rely heavily on context. There are two aspects in Hebrew. There's perfect aspect and then there's the imperfect. The perfect aspect is often translated as past tense, but it doesn't always mean past tense. It means a completed action. It could mean something completed in the future, even. And it can also it can partly be used in the context of narrative. So that something is complete and it's done. And then you have the imperfect aspect, something to convey ongoing or future actions. And ongoing doesn't have to always be in the future. You can talk about ongoing actions in the past as well. So that's where the context makes it. Now, in a future video, I'd like to take this and say, does that have, what about I am? How does that relate to God's name that he gives Moses? I am that I am. That's a verb. What tense is that? Well, it's not a tense. It's an aspect. Which of these two aspects is it? Perfect or imperfect? Well, we might take a look at that later in a future video. So if you liked this material, please let me know. And if you'd like to see more, please subscribe. Let's take a look at some of the comments. And holy cow, there's no way we're going to be able to get to all these. Wow. Okay. I'm just going to randomly pick one. It says, please put the chat. Okay, I'm going to put this up here. Just don't know that. Please put the chart of the letters in the description. Okay, so yeah, if I think I'm going to try to put as much of this material into the description later. If anybody wants to follow up and check out this channel, this video once it goes later today, I'll have that done. Make sure it's finished. And then we have another one here. Origin of mankind is Hebrew. I'm not sure what that means. Again, God was just using the languages that were already in use at that time. So if you want to call it Abraham probably didn't speak Hebrew, but in Chaldean, Uritic, I'm not sure. Then we have, I'll throw another one up here. When I used to live in Israel, I also learned modern Hebrew in a Ulpan course, and by myself, it's totally different from German English. Yes, and the three letters is crucial and helpful. Great, man. I'd love to hear more about your experiences with that, since you would have learned it in that area. And then I got another one from here. How did modern philosopher pointed out YouTube is garbage now more than ever? I think he's responding to a message. I'm going to throw another. These are not filtered. I'm just throwing them up here. 144p, or is it just me? I'm not sure what that means. I'm just going to throw a couple more up here, and then we'll wrap it up. And amazing phone I have got to watch on PC. Okay. Yeah. The chart that was too small. Sorry, there was so much information on there. If you're looking on the phone, you wouldn't have been able to capture it. And I'll like I said, I'll put those in the description. Phonics symbols, part fast car. Danyan Kuzmich. Is that how you showed the pronunciation of your name before? And I did have that up. I saved that from the last time, and I don't have it up right now. I was hoping to do it. So again, thank you for these comments. I see that somebody else is answering the comments in the chat, one of our buddies. And hopefully this has been helpful for you. Again, if you like this material, please let me know. Like and subscribe. And if you want to see more, we can do that. Please let me know in either the comments section, which unfortunately the live chat does not get put into the comment. Once we close this down, these comments are done. I'm going to go through them just myself afterwards, after we close down. Later this week, tomorrow, we're going to talk about how to boldly go into eternity, a Star Trek, the original series review. Then on Thursday, the surprising difference between eternity and time. What is it? Is eternity just everlasting? Does it just keep on going? Or are there other aspects going on there? And then Friday, temporal tension, time traveler's killer side effect. This is going to be a fun part. We're just going to talk speculation. If time travel exists, which I don't think it does, but for science fiction, how do you develop this? And we talked about 3 different timelines last week. There's an aspect that could be considered a 4th variation of that, and that'll be Friday. Until then, thanks, guys. It's been good. Enjoy the coffee, and we'll see you again.